welcome to the beginning of your second social studies quest. It's called A Walk in Their Moccasins. It will be about Native Americans of Indiana, and it's titled A Walk in Their Moccasins because there's a saying that says you need to walk in their shoes to understand them. Well, since Native Americans didn't wear shoes, instead they wore moccasins, I titled it A Walk in Their Moccasins because we want to know how they lived, why they lived that way, and what changed when they started to come into contact with Europeans. You'll see that this quest covers pages 72 to 99 in your social studies textbook. Our key point is people have lived in Indiana since prehistoric times. They started as nomads, but eventually began to make permanent settlements. When European explorers first arrived in Indiana, they encountered many Native American groups. After Europeans began settling in Indiana, they developed a relationship with the Native American groups living here. Over time, Native American life changed because of European exploration and conquest. That is our big idea for this quest. We'll learn about all those different things throughout it. It will be very important for you to understand what this is and what it means as we're learning and going through this quest. Our big question for this quest is, what was life like for historic Native American tribes in Indiana, and how did their lives change after the arrival of Europeans? Mission 1, or Level 1, is going to be on the early people of Indiana, and it's covered in your textbook, partly on pages 76 to 81, and some of the other things is found at a website called historyforkids.org. Here are important words to know. Make sure you're filling in these in your note guide right now. Migrate, archaeologist, prehistoric, artifact, nomad, mound. Migrate means moving from one place to another. Make sure you're filling that out in your note guides. Archaeologist, a scientist who studies people of the past. Make sure you fill that out in your note guides. Prehistoric, a time before history was written or recorded. Artifact, an object made by people in the past. Things that we can find, that archaeologists find in the past that we can research and we can study to find out how people lived in the past. That is an artifact. A nomad is a person who has no permanent home and moves from place to place. So this person might live at an area for a week or a month, and then they would move someplace else for a month or a week. They had no permanent home. And a mound is a large pile of hard-packed earth and other materials. Those are your important words to know. You'll see them appear throughout this level. Make sure that you understand them because they will be on your level up. Mission 1, humans arrive in Indiana. Our mission objective is to explain how humans first came to Indiana. Our challenge questions: how do archaeologists study the past? How do archaeologists think the first people came to America? And how did the first people of Indiana live? Those are our challenge questions. Make sure that you are ready to answer them at the end of this video. Archaeologists study prehistoric times by looking for clues that tell them when and how early people lived. Since we weren't there, we don't know how those people lived. We can only look for the clues that they leave behind to identify how they might have lived and how they might have lived among each other and interacted with each other. So that's just one piece of that puzzle. Many of these clues can be found underneath Earth's surface, and these archaeologists have to dig carefully in the places where the early people may have lived. So we keep putting together this puzzle by looking for these clues. Archaeologists look for artifacts and bones to piece together a picture of long ago. If they didn't have those clues, they wouldn't be able to visualize and predict what they think life was like. They wouldn't be able to picture it. These clues then would allow them to predict what life may have looked like in prehistoric times. Do they know for sure? No. But they might have a good idea based off of the clues that they found, the pieces of the different puzzles that they have found. When they put those puzzles together, the pieces of those puzzles together, they have a better idea of what life might have looked like. And why do they need to do that? Because they weren't there and they didn't write any of this stuff down, because it was before history was written down, prehistoric. Many scientists think that the first people came to America migrated from the continent of Asia. They believe that people arrived in America during the Ice Age, about 20 to 30,000 years ago. We learned about the Ice Age last quest. So during that time, they believed that people started to come to America. They didn't travel by boat, however, because much of Earth's surface was covered by glaciers. And some of the oceans froze, so they wouldn't be able to necessarily come in a boat, so they would have had to come here a different way. I want you to start thinking, how might have they got here if they didn't get here by water? During the Ice Age, some of the oceans froze and the water level dropped, causing the land underneath the water to become visible. So the sea floor became visible because the ocean levels dropped. For example, the Bering Strait's water level dropped and created a land bridge, which some scientists called it Beringia, that connected Asia and North America. Here you see the green represents the Bering Land Bridge. Today, that would all be water, and so we wouldn't be able to get across there today unless we traveled by boat. But during the Ice Age, they believed that people came from Asia and traveled across this land bridge and into what we call today Alaska. Again, that is just a prediction. They're not exactly positive on that, but that's a pretty good guess based off the clues that they have. Herds of animals like giant bison moved onto the bridge from Asia to eat the grass growing there. This is what scientists have discovered. Archaeologists think that people originally came to America because they were following these large animals as they moved across that bridge that I showed you before. Gradually, these people began to migrate south and would move through North and South America. Here you can see how scientists think that people traveled into North America. See that they started in Asia. They traveled across that land bridge following different herds of animals. And then gradually, archaeologists believe that these people would migrate further south and into North America and eventually South America. Again, they know this by looking at different artifacts and bones left behind from the past. We believe that these are the ancestors of the Native Americans that would live here many years later. These early people were nomadic. That means that they moved around all the time because they had to follow the movements of animals because they depended on those animals for food, clothing, and shelter. If those animals weren't there, they wouldn't be able to survive. So they had to follow them. They were their lifeblood. They would stay for a while in one place, and then whenever the animals started to move, they would have to move again because if they didn't have those animals, they wouldn't be able to survive. There were a couple groups of these prehistoric Native Americans. One was called the Paleos. These are the people that arrived in Indiana about 13,000 years ago. These people were hunters and gatherers, meaning they fished and gathered nuts, berries, and other foods. They lived in small groups and were nomadic, and they hunted large animals like deer, elk, bison, mammoths, and mastodons, and used spears with sharp points that they made from chipped stone. How do they know that? Again, they looked at different artifacts. They found these large spears. They found them next to animal bones. Here you can see from the picture these groups of Paleo Indians hunting with those spears. There was also the Archaic group, around 8,000 BC climate, of the earth began to get warmer, and some of the animals being hunted by these people, like bison and mammoth, died, and plants began to grow larger because the earth's climate had increased. The weather had increased. The temperature had increased, in other words. As a result, people were nomadic to a certain extent, but they also began to stay in places longer. They set up main camp for smaller camps nearby for hunting and gathering food. They started hunting smaller animals. In Indiana, they settled along the Wabash, Ohio, and White Rivers and ate a shellfish called mussels and built mounds. Here you can see one of those camps, those smaller camps, where they would still hunt for different things and gather other things, but they would stay there longer than they would have earlier. It's time for you to look at the challenge questions at the end of this missions note guide. Make sure that you've answered those 3 or 4 that are there before moving on. They're very important for you to understand. They are part of your grade for you to make sure that you filled them out. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I will see you in Level 1, Mission 2.